Hi, I'm Mike, this is TYT Science, and I'm going to engage in a little chat about open data and privacy in scientific research. If you saw my last video for TYT Science, that was about open access and open data. So to give you the very brief summary, open access is the drive to make all scientific publications freely and widely available. Hot on its heels is another movement called open data, and essentially the aim of open data is it's all well and good that we have free and open access to the results of scientific research, i.e. the publications, but that's not really enough because these publications are only the spin that scientists want to put on their findings after having looked at the databases. What we really need in order to maximize science is for all of that data to actually be out there so that we can validate other people's work, and this also has some great quality insurance benefits to it, and also to be able to reuse that data in a whole variety of different ways, looking at data that in these databases that hasn't been explored before, looking at the data in new ways, putting the data together to have more powerful analyses of what people have collected, and so forth and so on. Now, a major issue in open data within the health domain, and the health domain accounts for some 20 to 30% of all public funded research, is the fact that a very large chunk of this information comes from people, and so whether that's questionnaires or whether that's medical records such as information taken by doctors or during surgeries and hospital visits, or even down to biological samples or genetic information. Well, all of that comes from people, and standardly what we do in research, when we do research on people, is that we have consent where possible and confidentiality. So with consent, we want to make sure that those people who can consent to partaking in a study, they actually understand what's going on, and they agree to do it and participate. And in terms of confidentiality, we say we understand that you don't want your name blasted around with all this sensitive medical information. So what we will do is we will take your names out of the database we collect and your addresses, and then we will just look at this data within the research teams so it doesn't get sold off to insurance companies or whatever. However, as we move into the era of open data, there's a bit of a clash of interests going on, because in order to maximize information that patients or just participants give up to scientists, it's really effective if you can share that information around and relink it and exploit it to the fullest. But then, like I said, our old model is that no, we don't share it around because this is protection of your privacy. So how are we going to come up with a solution that fits everyone? Now, the first thing that people thought is you can share this kind of data, you just have to anonymize it. Well, anonymization, it turns out, is not as easy as some people thought it might be. And probably the most entertaining and perhaps the best known story around this comes from 1997, when there was a health insurance company in Massachusetts responsible for the data of public employees in Massachusetts, and they decided they were going to sell that data, make it freely available for research, but you pay a bit of money to get at it. And there was some concern about this, but people were reassured that this was all anonymized data, and the governor of Massachusetts, a guy by the name of William Weld, also stepped in to reassure everyone that this was fully anonymized data. Well, this sounded like a bit of a challenge to a young a computer scientist by the name of Latonya Sweeney. And what she did is she paid her $20 to have access to this vast anonymized medical database. She looked and then she looked at information about the governor himself from public voting records and what was known about the dates of his recent hospitalization, I think it was. And basically, by pairing up zip code and date of birth and the fact that he was male, and she essentially managed to, in all of these data records, very easily and very quickly identify which one was his. She sent this to the governor's office with a letter basically saying anonymized my ass, and that caused a whole storm, and it also started out her career in patient data protection and privacy. And she went on to publish quite a famous paper that showed that 87% of the US population can be identified by simply three things: their date of birth, their zip code, and their gender, male or female. And that's all you need. So thanks to revelations such as this, now when we deal with health data, such as health data from hospitals and other medical studies in the UK and in the States, generally speaking, what you do is you strip out date of birth as soon as you can. You take, age at time of interest, or you take year of birth, and also a postcode or zip code adds too much information. You need to convert that to local area or whatever you actually want to use it for. But that doesn't solve your problem, because there are many, many creative ways by which people can be re-identified, especially as databases become ever more rich, and they need to be ever more rich in order for us to do competent medical research and understand diseases on more refined levels. But let me give you an example of creative data linking. There was a paper earlier this year published in the magazine Science which looked at exactly this issue with genetic information. So they had a cohort of people who had given up their genetic genomic information, and those data had been stripped of all identifiers, apparently. However, there's so much genetic information out on the web that people have put up freely in association with their own names, that you can link between these anonymized data and the name data out on the web, and via relationships of people, you can actually go and identify a proportion of those that were meant to be anonymized, thanks to these genealogy databases, which are freely available because people are freely uploading that information. So when we say to patients or participants in scientific research studies, your data are anonymized, what we should really be saying is, as far as we know, they're anonymized, but we can't guarantee that they are not, that you're not going to be re-identified. And that's a big issue, because we all fear some future scandals of misuse along those lines that will tarnish the good name of open data. And when you consider all the things that you can do with open data, it really is something that you don't want to hold back. There's so much good that can happen with it. I mean, the scientific ideal is as follows: that all of us would actually have all of our data, our health data, online and fully interlinked. So all the hospital records from whenever we've had hospital visits, all of the data that our doctors have, that our GPs have, all of our genomic information, throw that into, to which, if we participate in scientific studies, we can add that information, and we can further enrich it with information about our diet, should we want to upload that, or our blood pressure, blood glucose levels, or whatever biological markers we want to contribute. Doing something like that would make fantastically rich and useful databases, allowing us to hunt down a lot of medical issues. And as scientific discoveries come along, it could also be very beneficial on a personal level for people to give us that kind of feedback and say, according to your lifestyle and your genetics, you need to be watching out for this. According to your family history and now information we know, red flag comes up for this, go and get checked out with your doctor. That would be in an ideal scenario. But of course, there are risks too. And if you have all of your information, your health information, just spewed out online, then people don't like the idea that anyone who's got an axe to grind against them or an issue with them can go and hunt through their personal information. You know, do a Google search on someone's genetics and medical and health. Similarly, there are issues with insurance companies having access to that data and being discriminatory on that basis, or employers likewise discriminating against you according to your health or the health of the family around you, which they feel may burden your time. So how do you go about trying to anonymize data to a reasonable degree and yet have it as open as possible? I mean, one thing you can do is you can fragment databases so that they are maximally stripped of any linkable information and only focus on narrow issues. But that really undermines a lot of what we should be doing in health research, which is more holistic and understanding how different diseases interact. That's where the real problems lie. Alternatively, you could have a password associated with vast databases so only medical researchers can come along and use it. But then that's not really a case of open data if you're saying only a select few can have a look at it. That shuts out a lot of innovative companies, that shuts out citizen science, and who's to say who gets access to it and not? Another thing you can do is you can have the vast raw databases in a secure environment, accessible only via an interface, which allows you to do all kinds of stats you want on the database. I do research on the database, but no access to actual individual records. And that is quite a solid solution for now, but it does take away all the creative things you can do with data linking that could actually serve a positive purpose. But one of the most interesting things is this, and that is that, generally speaking, when public opinion is surveyed on these kind of issues, or when you engage with educated public on these issues, people actually do understand the vast benefits of offering up as much information as they can for medical and health research. Being able to pool that and cross-link that, and it's such a boon to science that will benefit us all. And they also do understand the risks that come with that. And most people are prepared to take on some risk so long as they know that there's actually a body of people that would actively look to protect them, look to see where the dangers lie, and stop discrimination or nefarious use of information that they put out there. And as I was preparing this talk, a friend actually put me in touch with a talk by John Wilbank, a TED talk by John Wilbank, where he is making the claim that what we should actually do is take a much more active approach to this. The public should take a much more active approach to this and demand all of their medical and health information and put it online themselves via a website that he's involved with, which is weconsent.us, and I think that's consent to research. And so the idea being that instead of just being passive in this whole domain of your own health, you gather that information, you put it out there so that you can directly choose to show all of your information, offer that up to research, but then hopefully also in the future it's a route by which you can get very pertinent information about yourself and your own health and what you need to look out for. And I think that's a very interesting model. I think really the most important thing here is that we have this debate up front and openly. We talk about the benefits of sharing this kind of data and also the risks, and engage the public with it. And this is really where the governments of, let's say, the States and also the UK absolutely screwed up with this whole NSA farce and hunting down Snowden or smashing hard drives, enforcement goons smashing hard drives in the offices of The Guardian because they think that stops data information flow in the 21st century. But where they really messed up was they didn't have this debate with the public beforehand. They thought they were the great, good and wise decision makers about what was good and beneficial for us, so they would make those decisions behind closed doors and not involve us, and then when someone brings it up and rightly identifies it to be a big issue, they have to agree that it's an issue, but then go and get vindictive and controlling again. And this is why basically we don't trust politicians. However, the model that what we want to do, and I think I can speak for a lot of scientists involved in this area because I see their work and I know many of them, is it's very important that we just engage with the public via science communication, via bringing them into the conversation, and have this debate up front, because it's all about trust and sharing ideas, and the public are very knowledgeable on these issues and very capable of having these debates. And so I think when we engage with that kind of model, then I think together we can find an outcome that helps science, helps human health, and is beneficial to all of us. So those are my rambling thoughts on the issue. If you've lasted this long, please feel free to put any questions and comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Or if you have any interesting information that you think I should know about, I would absolutely love to hear it. Thanks very much.